Good morning, everyone. Back to the Namaste experience here at Namaste Village on this beautiful Tuesday in November. And today we're going to share what I think to be a very high esoteric lesson that may not grasp or mean much intellectually, but what may happen, what you may find happening is you'll be skimming across the surface of this until suddenly you hit a sinkhole, and then you just pull right down to the very center or the very bottom or the deepest part of this. And when you feel that happen, just follow it. Just let the energy and the experience of that take you. You won't understand it with your mind. It won't be an intellectual anything. In fact, it will completely dissolve the intellectual. And so that's why we're going to call this forced dissolve or a forced awakening. Now, this is very meaningful, I think, in relation to what we've been talking about here lately, which is the election and our feelings about it, and the releasing all of our attachments and just flowing with what is. Okay. Now, yesterday I had a meeting with a lovely guy who just moved here to town. And he is a Sufi and has been following a Sufi path for many years. He's going to be coming here to do a couple of talks. And one of the things that he was sharing his story with me of how he came onto a Sufi path and the different teachers that he has. Excuse me. And he spoke about a teacher that he was his primary teacher that he met in Vancouver. But this was a man who had actually emigrated from Turkey. And as he got to know him, this teacher shared with him that at the monastery where he lived in Turkey, they followed a path of what they called forced awakening or forced dissolve, or the path of blame. Now, that's very interesting, isn't it? Because we would usually think of blame as guilt, as something to avoid. But what they did was they used it as a tool to awaken. Now, to understand this, we have to remember that the egoic mind is going to constantly weave and bounce away and try to avoid a direct hit of the truth. Because if you encounter a direct hit, the game will be over. So we always turn, we always bob and weave, so we can maybe get a glancing blow, but not a direct hit. But their path of accepting guilt for things that they didn't even do, and just being in that experience of watching the dissolve occur, was a very high, very weird teaching. So, for example, if someone, let's say here at Namaste Village, someone here in the town said, I hear that you guys at Namaste Village drink the blood of bats. I'll just make something up. Now, our first inclination would be to say, where did you hear that? That is about as far from the truth as you can possibly get. My goodness gracious. Now, what they would have done at this monastery in Turkey was saying, oh, we do a lot more than that. Not only do we drink the blood of bats, but blah, blah, blah. And they would just continue it and accept it all, because what happens is it creates a pressure on the ego, much as we talked about yesterday in Jump Time, this idea from Gene Houston, where the pressure has to build to the point when suddenly that pressure pops it to the next plateau. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to hop to the next plateau, which is forced awakening. Now, we need pressure. We need force for that to happen, because otherwise, I hate to tell you, the ego once again is going to bob and weave and accept a glancing blow, but never a full-on direct hit, because it knows what will happen if you fully accept the truth that only love is real. And I don't mean intellectually. We all have that intellectually. no problem. But to fully receive that and to be uncompromising with that, this is what we're talking about. So this idea of a forced awakening, it would be very similar to what you've probably all experienced if you went to bed at night and you didn't wake up at the normal time. You decided to sleep in and you've been asleep for, let's say, 10 hours. Usually you sleep for 7 hours. You've slept an extra 3 hours. Your mind is going to begin to force you to wake up, right? So it's going to start to create what? Chaotic dreams. Your dreams are going to become chaotic, violent, bizarre. And it's going to increase in intensity until you finally say, I've got to wake up. And then you wake up. It's the exact same thing. So with these Sufis in Turkey, this path of guilt was meant simply for that, to increase the pressure to the point that a forced dissolve would take place. Now, those of us who had what I guess I could call the privilege of living at Endeavor Academy in Wisconsin with the master teacher know what I mean. I see a few of you here, and Vicky and others. You know what I mean, because this was the modality of the one that we call the master teacher, or Chuck Anderson. You can see a picture of him right there in the middle. So he would amp up the intensity and the pressure to the point that you couldn't stand it. And you had a choice at that point: run out the door and say, screw this, I'm not ready. And that's fine, because it's inevitable. This is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Or if you sat still in that and had no bob and weave, you didn't try to deflect and just accepted it, the pressure that would be created by that experience would pop you into life. And we saw that happen every day. It wasn't always fun. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I mean. You were there. It wasn't always fun. It was sometimes like, holy shit, I hope it doesn't come to me. Because if he comes to me, hopefully he'll do it to that guy. That guy's kind of a jerk when he needs it. But what am I really saying? I'm really kind of a jerk. And next thing you know, he's standing right in front of me. There were many times when that, well, not many, a few times when that happened to me, because it was exactly what I needed. I needed the force of that pressure in order to pop me to that next level. So that being said, usually in the morning, I'll just sit and meditate for a while, and something will spark in my mind, and I'll just grab my phone and write it down. And now and then, especially if I've been either listening to a recorded session with the master teacher or reading something, that voice will jump into my mind. Now, am I saying that I'm channeling him? No, not really. You can take it as that if you want. It's more that the voice of certainty at a certain pitch, almost like maybe like an impersonator would do an impersonation of someone. They're going to assume the voice, the tone of that particular person, and they're going to sound like that person. I think that's more of what happened. So this morning, as I was meditating, I felt his presence very strong. And this will give you a taste of what it was like. Are you willing to become completely reliant upon grace? You should know before you answer that this would require a complete and total surrender of your self-identity, or who you claim to be, in order to relax into a state of such profound openness and receptivity that the former concepts you've held so dear literally vanish before your eyes. Are you ready for that? Does that mean that they were never actually really there? Of course it does, because the only thing that has ever been real is the you that is known by God, or the perfection of grace that you've been trying to achieve without realizing. that it was never actually threatened. Let me read that again. The only thing that has ever been real is the you that is known by God, not the you that you've claimed, the self-identity or the egoic mind, but the you that is known by God, or we could call it the perfection of grace that you've been trying to achieve, but which was, of course, already achieved. You don't have to do anything in order to be who you've always been. The perfection of grace that you've been trying to achieve without realizing that it was never actually threatened. The you, or the identity that you've claimed until now, certainly seems real, right? If I pinch myself, it hurts. So it seems real. Where did I go? But at no time has the so-called competition between the identity you've claimed and your true identity that is claimed by God ever really happened. That may be a direct quote from him. At no time has the identity that you've claimed been in competition with the you that has been claimed by God. That has never occurred. And this buildup of pressure that you're beginning to feel, and this is why I said yesterday that I'm actually happy at this point that Donald Trump was elected, because all it's going to do is create a sufficient amount of pressure for that hop into grace, for that seeming competition between my mind and the mind of God to be dissolved. There is no competition simply because competition always involves the possibility that the more dominant player might lose. Do you hear that? If it's a real competition, it means that even if it seems to be completely unreasonable, that the more dominant player may lose. You know, when the Dream Team was first formed, I think it was in 1992. So the greatest basketball players who ever lived came together for one team, for one team, the greatest team ever assembled. You've got Michael Jordan, you've got Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, all of them. And there was no one in the world that could stand against them, but they did lose one game. Do you know who they lost it to? A bunch of college students. The first game they ever played, they played a bunch of college students from the US, just to kind of test them out, and they lost. The greatest team ever assembled. Now, what they found out later was that Chuck Daly, the coach of the team, kind of threw the game. He made his team lose by keeping Jordan on the bench, by not substituting, because he wanted them to lose. He wanted his own team to lose so that they would realize you can lose. Okay. Now, of course, every other team that they ever played, they'd win by 50 points, or there was no competition at all. But in order for there to be a true competition, there always has to be the possibility that the more dominant team or the more dominant player might actually lose. But in this case, that is not so. So let's read further. There is no possibility that you will win this battle. So the competition you seem to be engaged in has no meaning. Now, you don't realize that you're in competition with God. You don't realize or accept that you're in competition with the single mind in the whole universe, otherwise known as God. But that is the game you're playing. But it's inevitable that you're finally going to give up and lose that game. So why not now? Okay. When you fully accept this and surrender into an experience of total grace, you'll realize the futility of trying to manifest anything outside your own mind. In this way, grace meets grace. Stop for a moment to consider what this means. It would be the same as saying that God meets God. When you allow the pressure to build to the point that the awakening is actually forced, that you're forced open. It's like a diamond that the pressure increases on the piece of coal to the point that it cannot maintain its coolness. and transforms into a diamond. That's exactly what we're talking about. It would be the same as saying that God meets God, or that instant of such profound love has been achieved that everything that was not God, everything that was not coal, has been dissolved, leaving only the reality that is forever real. That reality is simply another name for you. Once again, that reality is simply another name for you. But once again, not the you that you believe yourself to be, but the you that love has protected since the beginning of time. That's who you are. So here we are in the pressure chamber. Here we are engaged in the moment you've literally been waiting for, but didn't realize you were waiting for it. When this opportunity arrives, this is what I like about this idea of this Sufi monastery, taking all the blame. One of the things that the master teacher used to say that people would have, and I've said it here, and people always have profound pushback on it, which is everything that's happening in the world is the result of your mind. Your mind. Now, what's going to happen is you as an individual are going to say, you mean flow did it all? Well, not flow, because there's no such thing as a flow. There's no such thing as a James. We're talking about that mind, that single mind that tried to hide from the all that is, which is an impossible game. It's an impossible game of hide and seek. But you've tried to hide from you. And so now that the pressure has increased to the point that the truth within you is being revealed, this forced awakening or forced dissolve is finally being achieved. And it's being achieved because of all the things that seem to be happening out here. Now, this really has nothing to do with it, except it's like in the dream again, when the dream becomes so chaotic that it forces you to wake up. I think that's a good thing, don't you? Isn't that the only thing you really want? To wake the hell up. Well, that's what we're doing here. So why not now? All right, Victoria, I'm going to turn it over to you. Can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. Of course, Vicky never knows what I'm going to say in advance, so she's always just as surprised as you are.
Thanks, Brother James. Well, you know, probably in a more common language, I would call that what many of you might know as the gift of desperation, right? And the gift of desperation it's very common in the AA world because nothing happens until we let go of all our options to try to get our way. That's really it. And what Calico wrote in the chat, humility, it's what true humility is. And finally saying, I want it this way, but I'm helpless, hopeless. I don't know what to do. You get to that, I don't know, surrender Dorothy moment. And that's a moment where there's a jump. And Dear One specialized in that, as anyone that was there knows. He specialized in it. He was masterful in it. And I will tell you one experience that changed my life. And there was only one time he really got in my face. And it was the perfect storm for me. Perfect storm, right? It was because I was there because I was attached to my relationship, my husband, my child. What do you mean you're going to go and follow some teacher? No. And I knew that Teddy belonged there, but I knew I didn't. But I stayed 3 years. And Dear One said that. He said, you don't belong here. You belong back in Boston, but I'm happy if you want to stay. And it came to a point where there was no option for me. The relationship kind of blew up. And Dear One got in my face, dragged me around the room as he would by the shoulder like this, and wouldn't let up. And in the middle of it, no one probably, or anyone maybe that was close to me saw it, in the middle of it, and he's on a tirade. He's doing everything he can to let me break that attachment because Teddy's doing it wrong. He wanted to run off and do something, have an affair or do whatever. And I'm thinking how righteous I am, and dear one's right in my face. And he said in the middle of it, he said, "Are you okay?" It's like on a dime. He was playing the game. He was masterful at it. We can't play that game while we're still holding to something or it's not authentic. A true teacher, a true master, a Sufi master can play that game because they've already let go and they know that it's a charade. When we're holding on to some attachment, it's not a charade. We think that's our salvation, whether it's the government or relationship or whatever. And it took me years to let go of my relationship with Teddy because I couldn't stand the heat and I wasn't willing to do the jump. And I realized that even then. And I said, I just can't do it. But I did leave. I came back to Boston. And it took me years of, I'll say, slow time to get to a point where I saw really this is God's will for me not to have this relationship. It is, and when I finally got to that point in slow time, I realized, oh my gosh, I could have gotten here years ago. Dear one did his best to get me there. So I have learned, believe me, I've learned when some upset, some attachment shows up in my face, whether it's my family, politics, friends, my body, weight, health, whatever it is, I'm all yours, God, right from the get-go. I'm never going to waste years of my life again running from that jump point. And I see what it's done. And I couldn't get to the jump point until I spent about a year doing Silent Tuesdays. That's when I got to it. It was finally after spending time in silence and in letting my soul listen deeply that I could finally hear and see, no, this is not for you, let it go. And in that moment, in a twinkling of an eye, I let it go by grace. But the gift was offered to me years ago, the way the gift is being offered to everyone today who's very upset about whatever the political climate looks like right now. The gift is being offered now. And if we can just let that pain, let it in, welcome it, don't defend. That's about being defenseless. Resist not evil. It's all of that. And let that explosion happen inside. We make that jump, and then the gift of the jump. And I saw this clearly in that experience with Teddy. The gift of the jump does give you a new perception. So then you know how to be in time in the situation. It's all given. There's no figuring it out because you're not always trying to manipulate things to get your way anymore. Instead, you're here to be truly helpful, and we're aligned with that grace Christ energy. And then our actions, our words, because it's impossible for us to be here and not give, because that's the nature of what we are. We're created to extend, to give. But instead of projecting anymore and resisting and maintaining this false identity, we have jumped up to that frequency of Christ identity where there is love without opposite. And that's what informs us to whatever it is we're here to say or do. And we do it gracefully, gratefully, and joyfully. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I love you guys. Hey,
Wow.
Calico.
I love when people from that association share these stories. It's always so fun to hear how each one of them broke us free. Now, for him, his was much more dramatic. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, those of you who are in the room, but he was a World War II veteran. He was in the Pacific. He was in battle. He was actually cut down by a samurai sword at one point. He went into, was it Nagasaki or Hiroshima? Nagasaki right after the atomic bomb. So he witnessed all of that. Can you imagine the pressure buildup of all of that? And then coming into a direct communion with grace and feeling the everything that he had experienced through his alcoholism, trying to run from it and not being able to run anymore. And then pop. So hopefully it won't be that dramatic for any of us, but we can claim it right now. We don't have to have such a dramatic buildup or explosion. We can do it simply through our decision of this is the only thing I really, really want. So with that in mind, Calico, close us down. Oh, it's Tuesday market. Calico will probably be walking down the path here any moment. But there she comes. Hi, Calico. She's walking right behind here. Tuesday, just so those of you who don't know, Tuesday is organic market day, and we have a car or taxis that take people to the market. So they're off to do that. But let's just really, I guess, receive this, not just intellectually, not just thinking, wow, that was a very interesting beginning to my day. Notice how that buildup is occurring in your mind. Maybe it is this election. Maybe it's something else. I've encountered so many people who are just holding on to their grief and their upset to the point that it's going to make them sick. Just accept it. Like that group in Turkey accept the blame, even for things that they never did. And then they amplify the things that they never did so that it increases to the point that you're going to pop right into this experience. Once again, why not today? And to this we say, Amen, 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 y punto. Thank you, everyone. Have an amazing day. We'll see you again tomorrow. Namaste.